Today we're going to talk about a process called eutrophication. In this process is basically the addition of chemicals to an ecosystem that usually causes negative effects. So let's start out with our ecosystem. Our ecosystem will have one large fish species at the top. This fish species will feed on a smaller fish species, which in turn will feed on a smaller species such as shrimp. The shrimp will feed on the smaller decomposing species found at the bottom of the ecosystem. On the left, we have a farm. This farmer uses fertilizer to help his crops grow large, and he also has some cattle. The cattle excrement and fertilizer both contain nitrogenous products as well as phosphorus. These two elements are the primary elements involved in the eutrophication process. When it rains, runoff happens, which is simply these elements being dissolved into solution and flowing elsewhere with the rainwater. For our purposes, the runoff will flow into a nearby stream, which will in turn empty into our ecosystem. This surplus of nutrients will promote favorable conditions for the algae at the top. These photosynthetic species will have a population boom. Once these species die, they will sink to the bottom and will be fed upon by the decomposing species that will also see a massive increase in population. The decomposing species will feed upon the algae, which will also consume oxygen. Oxygen, which is vital for these species to live in the ecosystem, will eventually be depleted as this species spirals out of control. Without oxygen in the ecosystem anymore, other species that need it to survive that also live on the bottom, such as the shrimp, may become extinct. This can have a spiral catastrophic effect, because if there's no shrimp, the fish species that feeds on them will also suffer, and if there's no more fish species for the larger dominant species to feed on, it may also become extinct. We just witnessed how the introduction of fertilizer and cow excrement byproducts can absolutely decimate an ecosystem. Another thing to consider is, say we have an algal bloom at the top. Some species, such as Anabina, can produce cytotoxins, which are highly toxic materials that can cause lots of damage to organisms. A shellfish species, such as mussels, is a filter-feeding species. It may consume these toxic algal blooms and also become toxic itself. Now, when humans harvest the shellfish, it also contains the cytotoxins it fed upon. This species is now toxic. So when humans eat this species, they can become very sick. This is common in shellfish. So that brings us to the question, what do we do when we have eutrophication occurring? There are two things we can do. One is to control the runoff. Farmers can watch how much fertilizer and where the cow excrement goes. They can also have species and systems that don't produce as much excrement or divert the excrement elsewhere. Second system is water treatment facility. With a water treatment facility, the contaminated water containing nitrogen and phosphorus can be treated chemically to remove the nitrogen and the phosphorus, and then it will not have any harmful effects on the ecosystem. So we know that ecosystems are capable of recovering. So let's do a demonstration. If we have ecosystem 1, it is healthy, the water is clear, and it's functioning well. And then we have an addition of nitrogen and phosphorus. This will cause a eutrophication process, which, as we can see here, causes the water to turn green. This is common in seeing a green layer on the eutrophication in lakes. Now, if we remove the phosphorus and nitrogen, the lake will slowly recover and return to its original water color. As this happens, species can start to reappear, and eventually the ecosystem will revert back to its normal kind. It is important to realize that eutrophication is occurring and get to it and solve the problem before too much damage is done.